Sarah, I'm raising my hand here. Start the recording. Hi, I'm Jane Trotter. I'm president of the Northwoods League of Women Voters. Welcome to our monthly meeting. I'd ask everybody to mute yourselves, please. This is the second time we've had a monthly meeting on Zoom, so we're still sort of all feeling our way. One thing that would be nice to know, how many people, is this your first time attending a League of Women Voters event? Oh, welcome. And Gayla, yeah?
It's the first time for the Northwoods League of Women Voters. I've been a member for a number of years to the Northwoods, but I was very active in another league in another state.
Right, thank you. And I know that we've invited town clerks to come. Do we have any town clerks that have joined us yet? Okay. And I will be doing this at the end of the meeting, but just a reminder that our next meeting will be Tuesday, November 10th at 6:30 p.m. And we will be having the director of the Oneida County Health Department, Linda Condlin, and she will be talking to us about legislation and healthcare. So that will be a timely thing. And then the final thing before I introduce our speaker today is that I just want to remind everybody, and we will have time for comments later, but I do want to remind everybody that the League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization devoted to voter participation and education. And so please keep that in mind when you're asking questions or making comments. So with that, let's get started. I'd like to introduce our speaker today, who is Karen McKim. Karen has been involved as a speaker or a participant in election security conferences at MIT, UC Berkeley, and in Washington, D.C. She is a nationally known advocate for election security. That is, making sure our election results accurately reflect voter selection. So her topic today is going to be vote from home, vote absentee, vote early. Should I vote absentee? And with that, I will turn it over. Thank you, Karen.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me. Let me see. Yeah, let me get the PowerPoint up here. Yeah, and I'm going to focus on two topics today. Everything having to do with how we can protect our right to have our votes counted. So I'm going to cover absentee votes and voting machines. But again, thank you so much for inviting me. Of all the groups I speak with, it's the League that makes me most hopeful that the words we exchange today will actually lead to action sooner or later. So I'm delighted to be with you today, so thank you for inviting me. Mostly I'm going to talk about facts about how Wisconsin counts votes and about the vulnerabilities we face and the safeguards we could put in place. But I won't be happy if all I do is pump a bunch of new data into your brains. Let's see, how do we get this slide to advance? Here. Let me see. My main hope today is that this Zoom will give everyone an expanded vision of voting rights, specifically a vision of voting rights that gives equal weight to both the right to cast a vote and the right to have that vote always counted accurately. Americans are very accustomed to thinking of voting rights as the right to cast a vote, but the adversaries of voting rights know that's not the case. Both the right to cast a vote and to have that vote counted are essential to our right to self-government. Neither one works without the other. Both casting and counting face threats and vulnerabilities, and both casting and counting need us to exercise attentive, sober, and determined vigilance. So that's the vision. And now to the facts about why we need to be vigilant about having our votes counted and about how to protect it. I'm going to start with an inspiring story of a community, a whole state actually, Rhode Island, where they took strong action to protect their full voting rights, including the right to accurate counting. In 2016, a yes or no referendum was on the ballot in North Kingston, Rhode Island. Pre-election preparation was all as usual: the ballot design, the voting machine programming, the pre-election voting machine tests, everything went normally. And on election night, the voting machines printed out poll tapes that showed the referendum failed in a landslide. If you believe the voting machines, fewer than 10 of more than 12,000 voters voted yes on the referendum, and most had not voted at all. Well, no one did believe that. A hand count was quickly revealed that the referendum had in fact passed decisively. And so by the time the election officials certified the correct results, no harm was done. The problem was twofold. First, the machines had accidentally been misprogrammed to look for voters' marks in the wrong place on the ballot. And second, the pre-election voting machine test had failed to notice the problem. It was human error all the way. Now, but election officials were deeply shaken. Even though no hacker had compromised their voting machines, the election was obviously not secure. I mean, secure elections are those in which nothing interferes with the votes being counted as the voters intended. Now, this time they had managed to detect and correct the miscount, but they thought, what if the error had been a simple yes-no switch and the machine was looking for yes votes in the no spot and no votes in the yes spot? The true results were decisive, so there would have been no recount, and no one would ever have known that a programming error had defeated a referendum that the voters actually wanted approved. And if this kind of misprogramming can happen accidentally, they wondered, what's to prevent an insider from making it happen on purpose? The close call in North Kingston opened Rhode Island's eyes. Officials and voters statewide became suddenly painfully aware that just trusting the voting machine's output without verifying it is not being vigilant. So, fortunately, 7 years earlier in 2009, the National League of Women Voters had convened a task force on election security and had the solution sketched out in their final report. The Rhode Island League of Women Voters and Common Cause knew that Rhode Island had the paper ballots. All they had to do to prevent a future catastrophe was to routinely use those paper ballots to verify the correct winners before certification. So they got a friendly legislator to introduce a bill to require something called a risk limiting audit, which is not a full recount. It's just a big enough hand count to statistically verify the outcome. State election officials and the Rhode Island's Clerk Association rapidly gave their support. The bill passed in 2017. A task force developed procedures to fit it in with Rhode Island's other election procedures, and local officials worked out the bugs in the 2018 elections. So in 2020, before they declare their election results final, Rhode Island will secure their final election results from both accidental and deliberate miscounts. Election thieves worldwide know not to bother with Rhode Island because any mess they make will be calmly and quickly detected and corrected right there as part of the canvas, and the correct results will be certified. Okay, now to Wisconsin and how we protect our right to accurately counted votes. The threats to accurate counting of our votes can be sorted into two piles. First, there's the things that pose a threat only to absentee ballots. And then there's a bunch of things that pose a threat to all ballots that are counted by computers. I'll start with that second pile, the voting machines. First, I want to go over a little foundation just to make sure we're all working with the same basic understanding of how computerized vote counting works. Across Wisconsin, wherever voting machines are used, one or two of these four companies, ES&S, Dominion, Command Central, and Clear Ballot, provide the hardware and the software, and they service the machines and they update the software. In most, but not all counties, all the municipalities that use voting machines use the same kind. And in these counties, the county clerk owns and operates what is known as an election management computer. For each election, the vendor delivers software specific to that election's ballot to this computer. I mean, all the voting machines have to be reprogrammed before every election because every ballot has a unique set of candidates and races. And the county clerk downloads that software onto portable storage media, USB sticks or SD cards, something like that. And then the municipal clerks pick that up from the courthouse, they take it back to their municipality, and they load it into the voting machines. That's how the software travels before an election. Now, Wisconsin is unique in this split ownership and control. In most states, either the county or the state own both the election management computer and the voting machine. Okay, now on election night, with the exception of just a few municipalities, Wisconsin's votes are tabulated right inside the voting machine at each polling place. In my opinion, this is a good thing. It's called precinct level count. The vote totals are then communicated in various ways to the county election computer, and the county clerk announces the results on election night. The results are also provided to the municipal clerk. At this point, the election results are only preliminary. They are unofficial. They are subject to correction. Within a week, the municipal board of canvass will have certified the results in local races, and within 3 weeks, the county board of canvass and the Wisconsin Elections Commission will have reviewed the results and certified them for the rest of the races. Now, after the results are certified, there is no provision in state law for changing them for any reason. If you're going to detect and correct any mistakes, you have to do it before that final certification, because those results are final. It's those final results we want to secure. Okay, now let's talk about security for this system. The first thing we need to do is let the local election officials entirely off the hook and accept that they are now doing everything within their power they can to keep the voting machines and the software secure. Not only are they doing the best job they can, but it's a safe bet that no one in Moscow or Beijing or anywhere else is spending much effort figuring out how to hack an individual voting machine in Wisconsin's North Woods. I mean, nothing personal, but your voting machines are not high-value targets. That's a good thing. But Wisconsin as a whole is a high-value target, so we need to understand the vulnerabilities, which in fact are most serious, before the voting machine software ever arrives in Wisconsin. Local election officials control only the tail end of a long chain of custody for the voting machines and their software. Let's start with manufacturing these computers. The vendors have all testified to Congress that although the machines are assembled in the United States, they all are built with programmable components that are manufactured in other countries, specifically China, outside the control of our local election clerks. The technicians who service the voting machines come to the Northwoods. You can meet them and talk to them, but they too are not under the effective control of the local clerks. ES&S, the company that counts the votes in Lincoln County and counts 80% of the rest of the votes in the state of Wisconsin, has admitted, again in sworn testimony before Congress, that its technicians have installed unauthorized wireless communications capability into county election management computers in Pennsylvania and in several other states that they won't name. ES&S said that the technicians did it only for their own convenience so that they could service the machines remotely, not so that they could hack them. And they're probably right, but trusting them is not being vigilant. And they swear that they've put an end to the practice, again, which they might, but let's think about vigilance. But how many clerks know how to inspect their machines after the technicians leave to see whether unauthorized alterations were made? And how many clerks have any way to tell how well ES&S or any other vendor monitors their technicians to make sure that they don't install any more unauthorized components or software? None do. We cannot expect that of our local election clerks. That critical element of voting system security is not a measure of vigilance that we can make happen. The software itself originates somewhere outside Wisconsin and is updated who knows where. Here's another true life example. Dominion Voting Systems is the company that manufactures and supports the ImageCast Evolution machine, the ICE machine, which is now in use in Vilas County and is being considered by other counties in your area to replace their old machines. Dominion has officially acknowledged and defended its practice of subcontracting with programmers in foreign nations to write and update the software for American elections. This was detected when an American voting rights advocate was visiting Serbia and saw an ad in the local paper seeking programmers for American voting machines. Now, maybe Dominion has a secure foreign subcontracting process, but even federal officials have no way to know how careful the vendors are about who they contract with or how the software gets to and from Serbia or wherever it's updated and created. Again, vigilance like this is far beyond the power of our local election clerks. Local election clerks can and do perform pre-election voting machine tests, but those tests are not effective against malicious software, which would be designed to activate only on election day. And even if we pretend that no one will ever deliberately mess with Wisconsin's voting machines, there are still other threats. Hacking isn't everything. You remember that story I told you about the Rhode Island municipal referendum? Exactly the same thing happened with a municipal referendum in Stoughton in 2014. They even used the same machines, DS200s from ES&S. It was the same miscount, and it happened in Stoughton. Nationally, some of the biggest electronic miscounts have been caused by undetected malfunction, the machines just losing calibration and starting to count the votes wrong. So for a moment, set aside the computers that count our votes. Let's talk about how can we be vigilant against something that we can't control like this, the security of the machines and the software. Can you think of any other computers used for any other serious business or government function for which the managers have no way of detecting flawed computer output before they use it as a basis for irreversible decisions? Your bank doesn't trust its ATMs. They audit them daily. Your corner convenience store manager doesn't trust the computerized cash register. That cash register tape and the cash drawer are reconciled at the end of every shift. Your municipal treasurer likely uses a computer to calculate property tax bills. And your local treasurer might even put those bills in the mail without checking their accuracy. But if there is a mistake, it won't go unnoticed. Your city treasurer will hear from the property owners pretty quickly, and your city treasurer has a way to correct the error. Outside elections, trusting computers is not considered a good thing. It is considered careless and naive. The vote counting computers are the only ones we use for massively consequential decisions, even when their managers have no routine procedure that would reliably alert them when the output is wrong. I'm going to repeat that sentence just for emphasis. The vote counting computers are the only ones we use for massively consequential decisions, even when their managers have no routine way that would reliably alert them when the output is wrong. Now, the people who want to mess with American elections know that. So what are we going to do about it? I hope I have convinced you that actually making the voting system secure is just not one of our realistic options. More and better technology is not going to protect us. The answer is much simpler than that. Our election clerks have to do the same thing that every other computer-dependent manager does, which is routinely check the computer output against other records, in this case, paper ballots, before finalizing the decision. Do the same thing Rhode Island does. Some Wisconsin election officials now try occasionally to perform, no, they don't try, they do. They do occasionally perform random voting machine audits. That is, they select a few machines after an election and they do a hand count to verify that those machines counted accurately. These audits are good, but they fall short of securing the election results, of providing actual election security. They lack three critical features. First, none of these audits select a sample designed to verify the correct winner. They just randomly select a few voting machines. Technically, it's called a spot check. And second, even when one of Wisconsin's voting machines detects a miscount, and miscounts have been detected, Wisconsin officials stop the audit. They do not expand it to other machines. And because of that, these audits can never confirm the correct winner. third, and most surprising to me, and I've been watching Wisconsin's voting machine audit since 2012, and I'm not making this up. Every time an audit has detected a miscount, and to be fair, the miscounts so far have been small, election officials went ahead and certified the voting machine's numbers without correcting them based on what the audit found. Wisconsin laws do not require officials to correct the official results in response to an audit, and so they don't. Now think this through. What is going to happen if the random voting machine audits that follow the upcoming election find a potentially outcome-altering miscount? The election night winner will not want the results changed. He will go to court to force election officials to do what they have always done in the past, which is to stop the audit and certify the uncorrected results. I fear that such a lawsuit would prevail based on precedent. I don't really think a court would order the Elections Commission to make up new audit policies after the votes have already been counted. The fact is that Wisconsin is way behind in our vigilance about vote counting and as in our election audit practices. Outcome verifying auditing was recommended 11 years ago by that National League of Women Voters Task Force. In 2014, President Obama's National Commission on Elections Administration endorsed outcome verifying audits. The Federal Elections Assistance Commission recommends them. 8 other states have already written them into their laws, and additional states are working on it. Wisconsin is not. Risk limiting audits are very cheap and quick when the voting machine picked the right winner, which of course is almost always. When the machines have not picked the right winner, risk limiting audits cause a lot of extra work, but that work is justified. So how do outcome verifying audits work? In a very short explanation of them is picture a regular traditional exit poll. A pollster selects a random sample of voters, just enough to provide statistical confidence, and asks them who they voted for. The pollster can then identify within a narrow margin of error which candidate won. Now, picture that same thing being done after the polls close, but election officials ask a random sample of ballots, just enough to confirm the right winner, who the voter voted for. And if it's within a statistical margin of error from what the voting machine says, they say they've confirmed the right winner, and the audit stops. Now, these audits cannot prevent the voting machines from identifying the wrong winner, but if the voting machines ever do, outcome verifying audits can make sure the hacked results are never certified. And that is what matters, and that is election security. In 2021, Wisconsin needs to join the states whose canvass procedures actually secure the election results. We need to be that vigilant about our vote counting. But no Wisconsin legislature has yet introduced such a bill. And I'm hoping the League of Women Voters of Wisconsin will make sure that that gets corrected next year. Okay, now to absentee ballot counting, for which unfortunately there isn't such a simple safeguard. Before I start talking about counting absentee ballots, I want us to review what happens with ballots that are marked at a polling place. The start of the counting process for polling place voting is when the voter has marked their paper ballot and is walking over to the voting machine, or if you use a touchscreen machine, it's the point at which you're standing at the machine and the paper audit trail has already been printed, and the machine is waiting for you to touch it one more time to confirm that you want to cast that ballot. Now, for in-person ballots that have reached that stage in the process, there are no more security issues left to discuss other than the ones that are inside the machine that I already talked to you about. There's nothing. Those ballots are secure. After the voter marks the ballot, no one else will see it or touch it. Every single ballot that is marked at the polling place and cast by the voter's own hand will be counted. But now to absentee ballots. The start of that counting process is when the marked ballot has arrived back at the clerk's office on time. Now, most absentee voters consider that the finish line. They think, oh, the ballot got back to the clerk's office on time, I'm good. But that's only the start of the absentee counting process. And the absentee ballots faces several more threats that simply don't exist for in-person ballots. These 4 photos show on-time absentee ballots being processed in Madison and in Milwaukee before the April and August elections. Data from those 2 elections in Wisconsin has not been studied adequately, in my opinion, but the best estimates are that statewide, something between 1.5% and 2% of the on-time absentee ballots were not counted. That's 1 in every 50 to 66 ballots. That is a much higher price in disenfranchisement than we have ever paid for voter ID. The vast majority of the absentee ballots rejected in November will have a flaw with the envelope. And in most, but not all of those cases, the flaw will be the voter's failure to comply with some or another requirement. So here's where the absentee ballot security issues get really difficult. There are good security reasons for most of the requirements that cause absentee ballots to be rejected. But each of those requirements also leads to a different kind of ballot security issue, which is the rejection of many of otherwise valid ballots. Take, for example, the requirement that the absentee envelopes must be sealed and show no signs of tampering at the moment on election day when a poll worker opens them so that the ballot can be cast. The legitimate reason for that requirement, it is legitimate, is to deter fraud. You don't want to have the clerk open the storage room on election morning only to find bins full of envelopes that have been ripped open and taped back shut. You have to forbid those ballots from being counted if you're going to deter that particular kind of election tampering. On the other hand, the requirement creates a ballot security problem because it means you're going to have to reject or at least challenge a lot of valid ballots. Sometimes the envelope glue just comes unsealed on its own, or because it's been in a humid condition, or because the envelope was manufactured badly. Some absentee ballot envelopes get innocently torn or damaged in handling. I mean, this is going to happen. After the April election, I called around to interview Wisconsin municipal clerks about their rejection rates and practices. One of my questions was what they considered to be a, quote, sign of tampering. They expressed several different ideas, and most seemed unaware that their ideas were different than those of other municipal clerks. Some saw taped shut envelopes and assumed that the voter had forgotten to include the ballot when they first sealed the envelope and fixed it and taped it back shut again, and the clerk accepted the taped shut envelopes. Others saw every taped shut envelope as one that might have been tampered with, and they rejected them. Signature matching provides another instructive story. Now, Wisconsin does not yet require signature verification, but the record in other states is well established and is instructive about the high cost paid in disenfranchisement and, well, money by efforts to prevent absentee fraud. In both Washington and Oregon are both 100% mail-in elections. Signature verification in those states is largely automated, and it's done on an industrial scale as the ballots are whipped through electronic readers that match the signatures with those on file. And this is done for every single mail-in ballot. All the evidence indicates that the practice is very successful in deterring fake ballot fraud. Earlier this year, I contacted officials in those states to ask about how signature verification was working for them. They were very quick to reassure me over and over and over again that their signature verification efforts find no fraud. When signatures don't match, they said, it's because a wife was signing for her husband with a broken wrist. It's because an aging voter developed a tremor. It's because a college student is no longer dotting the I in her name with a little heart like she did in high school. None could identify for me a single case in which signature matching had detected any actual fraud. They hadn't referred any of these cases to the district attorney. But in the next breath, those officials would proudly tell me how vigilant they are about mismatched signatures, as if it was a good thing to challenge men with broken wrists and helpful wives. The data back them up on that. In every election in both those states, officials reject tens of thousands of ballots in every election without finding a single case worthy of prosecution for fraud. In Wisconsin, the clerks, like in Wisconsin, the clerks in those states often try to contact the voters and get them to fix the problem before Election Day. And a lot of voters can and do, but not all absentee voters can be reached. And not all of the absentee voters who can be reached are willing or able to make the extra effort needed to correct the problem with their absentee ballot. In the end, the documented rejection rate in Washington and Oregon hovers around 1%. That is, 1 in every 100 ballots are never counted. Again, that is a higher price than Wisconsin pays for voter ID. And like voter ID, studies show that that price is paid most heavily by young voters and old voters, minority voters, and low-income voters. It's not evenly borne. Let's come back to Wisconsin now. Neither the Elections Commission nor anyone else has done a good, thorough study of the local clerk's success in counting on-time absentee ballots, either in April or in August. So what I'm about to tell you is based only on my own work. Following the April election, I asked the Elections Commission for the data, but they wanted to charge me $24,000 for it. So I started contacting municipalities directly and managed to get data from 14 municipalities and later found a 15th in a newspaper story. And I mean, what I found, the overall rate, about 1.8% rejection, 1 in every 55 on-time absentee ballots, is consistent with what people have estimated as a statewide rate for Wisconsin. 1.8% of the on-time absentee ballots statewide were rejected in April and August. But most disturbing, to me at least, was the variation. Look at the variation in those rejection rates. Do you think Spooner voters are 8.5 times more careful or intelligent than Green Bay voters? Do you think 1 in every 14 Cedarburg voters is careless, where every single voter in the village of Maine can read and follow instructions? Or is it more likely that their municipal clerk's practices have been something to do with the rejection rates that we see on this chart? Okay, I'll stop being coy now. This table shows a shocking level of inconsistency and potentially a shocking number of voters who were disenfranchised in one city who would have had their absentee ballots counted had they voted in another. In Wisconsin, municipal clerks have a lot of discretion about a lot of things. I already told you about, they have discretion how they interpret absentee voting requirements, like the taped shut thing. In addition to this discretion, the municipalities receive very little oversight. I could probably say even none from the county clerk or the state elections commission that might serve to even out absentee ballot rejection practices or hopefully reduce them. The Wisconsin municipal clerks also have complete discretion regarding how or even whether they contact voters whose ballots are rejectable. Notification is not required in Wisconsin. Most clerks do try, but a municipal clerk would be completely within the law if he or she made no effort. And not contacting the voters actually works both ways. I won't say who, but I did interview one municipal clerk who made a practice not of rejecting, but of correcting some voters' ballots without telling them. The clerks who do try to contact the voters use various practices there too. Some use snail mail to try to contact the voters, some try email, some try phone, some try only once, others will try several times. And you can see where this wide variation in a rejection rate starts to shape up. And if they do reach the voter, more variation. Some clerks offer to invalidate the flawed ballot and send the voter another one. Some ask the voter to come into the municipal clerk's office to correct the problem. Some will allow the voter to give oral authorization over the phone for the clerk to fix the problem themselves. Now, I don't have any good suggestion about how to improve our vigilance about on-time absentee ballot counting rejection rates. I, for one, don't want to shrug and say, well, voters give up their right to have their ballots counted reliably as soon as they put it in an envelope. I'm not willing to do that. At a minimum, what can be done is the Wisconsin Elections Commission should routinely calculate and publicize absentee rejection rates by municipality. We should treat this as an indicator of the quality of election administration in the same way we look at turnout rates or polling place lines or that sort of thing. If you're familiar with the Elections Performance Index, which is a national election quality index developed by Pew Trusts and managed by MIT, you know that absentee rejection rate is one of only 17 indicators by which they measure the quality of election administration. As I called around to other clerks, I realized, however, that most of them, at least back in April, did not even see absentee ballot rejection rate as anything they should be tracking. None of them had calculated their own rejection rate when I called. I could calculate those rates for them with numbers that they gave me. And they certainly didn't know how they compared to surrounding municipalities. If the chart you're seeing on the screen now contained all Wisconsin municipalities, I believe it would be a real eye-opener for a lot of municipal clerks. I'm sure there would be many other municipalities up there with Milwaukee, Green Bay, Janesville, Racine, Cedarburg. And I'm guessing those clerks would immediately get to work on finding ways to bring their rejection rates into line with the state average. And hopefully, just having this information would help all municipal clerks see it as something they should be trying to reduce. That's something the league could do. When I urged the Elections Commission to calculate and release municipal absentee rejection rates, they just brushed me off, even though they do a lot of other good reports. But if the league asked for rejection rates by municipality or asked a legislator to ask for it, we might get somewhere. Beyond that, understanding how to bring absentee rejection rates down needs serious, sober study. Voter education can certainly help. And those voters who are plugged into education and do want to pay attention to it and are capable of following those complicated instructions, it will help them. But I'm thinking about voters who might not be reached or might not be able to follow those instructions. So I am pleading with you not to imagine voter education will solve the problem any more than voter education solves the problem with voter ID. We could have the most educated electorate in the nation, and elderly people would still develop eyesight problems and misread the instructions or sign the ballot in the wrong spot. We'll still have manipulative spouses intercepting their partner's ballot. We'll still have manufacturing issues that cause envelope glue to come unsealed. But while a few people will always need absentee ballots, I have to end with a plug for the neighborhood polling place. Given the fact that no one but a voter touches a polling place ballot before it is counted and after the voter has marked it, is something that absentee voting will just never be able to do, no matter how well managed. It just can never be as secure. Not many people know that the CDC studied the aftermath of Wisconsin's April elections. Their report was issued in July. And the CDC could not trace one single infection back to a Wisconsin polling place. They found no overall effect on Wisconsin's infection rate. The rate had started to decline before the election and continued to decline after. And election officials are set to do an even better job with health precautions at the polling place than they are in November than they were in April. So when this pandemic is over, we need to get as many voters as we can back to their neighborhood polling places and try to save the absentee ballots for the voters who need them. Okay, I've already taken longer than I meant to, and I'm eager to get discussion going. So again, thank you for the attention, and I hope you found this presentation interesting and useful.
All right, now is a good time for questions. Thank you so much, Karen.
Oh, you're welcome.
Very sobering. Somebody wants to ask a question. If anyone wants to raise a question, raise your hand and then I'll unmute you. Dorothy. Go ahead.
Karen, you suggested what we could do after this election. It looks like a 1 to 3 year plan, but what are we going to do between now and November 3rd, 2020?
I don't know. My presentation to you was originally scheduled for April, and I even thought of telling you guys, no, it's too close to the election. I don't want to raise all these issues at this point in time, because for the most part, there is nothing we can do at a large scale. On a small scale, I'm running around encouraging all my friends to vote at the polling place. I have no qualms about telling people it's going to be safe, if for no other reason than that a lot of voters are voting absentee, and the lines will definitely not be long. But yeah, again, some of you are probably familiar with the instructions the municipal clerks are getting from the Elections Commission. And yeah, those polling places are going to have some really nice health precautions in place. They will be safe. As far as the election audits go, anytime you can contact your county or your municipal clerk. Under Wisconsin law, they're not required to audit, but they're allowed to. Any Wisconsin clerk, or I don't want to be so hard on municipal clerks here, because their canvass period is very short, only 1 week, and county clerks have 2 or 3 weeks. But any clerk, municipal or county, could do a real, more rigorous protective audit during their canvass than even without any more state laws. It's their discretion. So contact your own clerks and urge them to do protective audits, at least to protect the votes in your area. Let me see. Also, this is once every 2 years. The Wisconsin Election Commission is going to order something called the Section 708 sub 6 audits after the November election. They're going to randomly select a bunch of voting machines statewide and have them hand counted. Now, these audits have a really weird instruction in them. That the auditors are going to be instructed to count the votes as the machine would have counted them. So if the voting machine miscounts because it was misprogrammed, the way the North Kingston and Stoughton machines were, I'm not making this up. The auditors are going to be instructed to ignore that and say that the voting machine counted the votes exactly the way it was programmed to do, so there's no problem. And now there's a reason for that, but I won't explain it. It has to do with what WEC thinks the purpose of the statute is. But so we have to have observers at these audits to notice if a voting machine miscount was noticed and attributed to misprogramming or something. And the problem is we won't know when and where we won't know when or where these audits are going to happen until like the Wednesday or Thursday after Election Day. The Elections Commission is, like I said, randomly select voting machines after the election. So you have to be alert and not know where you're going to go or exactly when. The audits are all going to happen within the 2 weeks following the election. But if we get observers at those, that'll at least help make those audits a little more protective than they're planned to be at this moment.
Just as a follow-up to that, the League of Women Voters of Wisconsin has called off the in-person election observer program.
Oh, no.
For this election. And so those of us who are poll workers, is there a checklist or some things to do that you could recommend those of us who are poll workers to do on election day?
Oh, you know what? No, there is something, and it's important. Again, actually, every one of the biggest voting machine miscounts in Wisconsin history that I know of revealed itself as a significant undervote rate. I mean, the total number of votes in the presidential contest should be within like half a percentage point of the total number of ballots cast. So if poll workers can be alert for a suspiciously high undervote rate, like if you have, 100 ballots cast and only 66 ballots in total for all the presidential candidates, that is a big red flag that the voting machines are miscounting. The Stoughton miscount revealed itself that way. The city of Marinette recount, the city of Medford miscount, they all showed up as serious undervote rates. And if the poll workers notice that undervote rate, write it into the chief inspector's report and follow through at the municipal canvas to make sure it's investigated and resolved. It was really tragic. There was a big miscount in the city of Marinette in 2016 that got certified all the way, municipal, county, and the poll workers had noted it in their chief inspector's report that a third of the votes seemed to be missing, but nobody followed through with the municipal canvas or the county canvas, and they just ignored it and certified the wrong results. So that's something poll workers can do. Be alert for election results coming out of the machine that just look funny, and make sure your municipal canvas takes them seriously and resolves them.
Any guideline on what the cutoff is for a serious
Undercount?
undervote rate?
I've heard different things. 0.2%. That is, there should be 98. Presidential elections are the easiest ones because you don't go to the polls in a presidential election year and say, oh, I have no preference. Not this year, at least. Some people say 0.2%. 0.5%, I think, is the more widely respected cutoff. In a presidential election, no more than 5 out of every 100 voters should be leaving that presidential race blank.
I'm raising my hand. We in Oneida County have a newspaper that is very rabid about using the Freedom of Information laws to get access to all kinds of things, to the point where they use it almost for harassment. But
Yeah.
nonetheless, it seems to me to be charged $25,000 for the information you requested, which was provided by your and my taxpayer money. There may be an issue with this, and I'm wondering if this isn't something that, we could even get pro bono attorneys to push through to try to get access to that information.
Thank you for saying that. If I was a litigious person, I would have fought Election Commission on that point. I know they've provided it to other people, and I don't think they charge these other people. I mean, the MIT Election Data and Research Center, I believe, has the data. Again, it's from WisVote. It's individual voter records. Did this person request an absentee ballot? Was this absentee ballot returned? That sort of thing. But I'm not a litigious person, and I did figure I could get useful information myself. But the other reason I didn't really contest it is that I do feel very strongly Wisconsin Election Commission should be doing this themselves. And, they calculate all other sorts of with election performance indicators, and they monitor the municipal clerks in every other way. And if it was the Wisconsin Election Commission itself who calculated those rejection rates and released them, that would be so much more effective than anyone else doing it. And so, yeah, my message to the Elections Commission wasn't, I'm going to sue you for, wanting to charge me $24,000. My message to them was, and still is, you should be doing this yourself. It's your data. You could crunch these numbers in 4 hours. And when you release them, they'd matter. So that was my thinking and why I didn't contest that.
Or questions? Raise your hand.
Yeah, could you, Karen, could you
Dorothy? We had somebody else ask a question.
Oh,
Can I-
sorry.
Yep. Brenda.
Okay, hi, this is Brenda Muller. I'm from Lincoln County. We, have the early voting where you can go to City Hall and cast your ballot. We've never had a line. It takes 5 minutes and we're in and out. The ballot goes straight to the city clerk's office. So very secure. But I'm amazed how many people don't realize that's an option. And I'm wondering if there's a way we can get that word out to more people that this is a safe and effective option to do before November 3rd.
Well, I'm not going to be the one to get that message out because, again, yes, dropping your ballot off at the municipal clerk's office is safer than putting it in the mail, but it's not as safe for your ballot as in-person voting. Anytime you put your ballot in an envelope, you are opening it up to certain risks that simply do not exist when you insert it with your own hands into the tabulator. And the other thing is, again, I absolutely agree that, the more voters we can convince to do things like go to the drop boxes and take every step voters can take to protect their absentee ballots is a good one. And anyone else who wants to get the word out about what Brenda suggested, go for it. But I'm always thinking that, there are still going to be a lot of voters who aren't going to be able to do that or won't, or, will get confused by it.
Well,
And I think that, and again, I think the same way I think about voter ID. It's like, yes, you can go to the DMV and get a state ID and you can do these extra steps and secure it, but you shouldn't have to, and you should know the risks you're taking and that sort of thing. Anyway, sorry, go ahead, Brenda.
Just to be clear, I'm not talking about requesting an absentee ballot ahead of time. We go there, we give them the information, they hand us our ballot, they make sure our envelope is filled out correctly.
And so that eliminates the risks that the ballot won't get to you, and it eliminates the risks that will get lost in the mail on the way back, but it doesn't eliminate all those risks that threaten the absentee ballots after the clerk receives it, which are, the rejection and the getting damaged. And if I actually read through the recount minutes of all the 2016 recount, every county kept minutes of its recount, and I was studying them and read through them all. A lot of absentee ballots, Dane County was the only one where I actually counted them. A lot of the recounts found absentee ballots that had been submitted in envelopes. They might have been early ballots like you're talking about, and that were just delivered to the wrong polling place on election day and never counted. City of Madison alone, there were 5 dozens, more than 5 dozen, 66 absentee ballots that had just accidentally been delivered to the wrong polling place on election day and never got counted. And again, that didn't change the outcome. You can say, oh, that's only 66 ballots, blah blah blah, but if the municipal clerk office had deliberately taken 66 ballots and thrown them out, we would have been outraged. It is a risk. And again, what you're saying is absolutely good. It's better to get your ballot at the municipal clerk's office than to ask for it through the mail. It's better to drop it off than to send it in. But it just can never be as secure as voting by yourself with your own hand at the polling place. And we have to be vigilant about things like, that's another thing poll workers might be able to do. If you live in a municipality where there are a number of polling places and you do get an absentee ballot that's in the wrong polling place, do anything you can to get that to the right polling place and get it counted. Yeah. So,
I see another question from Barbara Kane.
Well, it's more of a comment. My husband decided he wanted to vote in person and not do his absentee ballot. So he talked to the clerk. Clerk said, tear up your ballot and then get rid of that and you can come and vote in person. I sure hope she gave him the right information.
Well, actually she did. Whatever your municipal clerk will give you a different answer when you call them and ask, okay, I already have my absentee ballot, but I want to return it in person on election day. What do I do? whatever your clerk says is the right answer. And your husband did the right thing by calling his municipal clerk, because the answer differs depending upon the municipality. You know, when you said tear up your ballot, and I went like this, like, you know, in my municipal, no, you have to return that ballot to my municipal clerk.
It sounded strange to me and made me nervous. And, you know, he was like, no, she says it's fine. It's like, okay, but I just thought I would mention that, but this is very disturbing information. So, but good to know. Thank you.
The municipal clerk is the king, queen, emperor of what happens in their own municipality. So if your municipal clerk says tear it up, you can tear it up.
And Brenda, to your question, I learned when I was doing poll watching for the League of Women Voters in Oneida County and Lincoln County, a lot of municipal clerks in little tiny towns don't have offices. So going to the clerk's office is not an option. And when you go to the various different websites, their office is listed as their home address. So it's because these towns don't have a lot of money. This is not a full-time job for them. And it's fine if you live in Rhinelander or you live in Tomahawk, but if you live in Lincoln Hills, maybe not. So those are, you know, some of the things that make it a little more confusing for rural voters. And we focus so much on what happens in the big towns, but it's the little towns that can't afford the technology, that can't afford the money for the lock boxes and so on. Although some really good data has been given about what has been given to our various different small areas to help afford what they need to do for voting. Right, Deb? Any other questions or comments? Dorothy, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I'm sorry. The device I'm using doesn't allow me to use the hand raise function. So Karen, I was wondering if you could just email a list of your recommendations for the Wisconsin Election Commission, things you wish the Wisconsin Election Commission would do. If you could send that to our league email, it's information@lwvnow.org. And I asked to do that so that we as an individual league can advocate for those things, but also because the State League of Women Voters, after each election, submits a report to the Wisconsin Election Commission, has some kind of feedback mechanism to the Wisconsin Election Commission. So that would be another avenue for us to advocate for those improvements.
And the Election Commission pays attention to that report. That's a respected report. I know that. Yeah, and again, I'll also phrase that as things I'm hoping the league can do. There's so many ways this pandemic has messed up stuff. What was the former state league president, Aaron? Oh, I can't remember. Pardon?
Erin Grunzy.
Yes. She and I had been talking really closely, and we're starting to formulate, ideas about what the league could do to get routine election securing audits in Wisconsin. But then she retired, and before I got around to it on my calendar to meet with the new president, the pandemic came, and I've gotten so far behind. So yeah, I need to get the state league's attention again and say, here's the path to getting election securing audits in Wisconsin done in the legislature. Hopefully the new legislature will be more amenable to actually passing some good laws, the one we have. And I actually did meet with a Republican legislator late last year, late 2019. And she seemed fairly interested in election audits, but she told me point blank, we're not going to be passing any more legislation for this session. Get it. And but Mark Miller did start the Legislative Reference Bureau working on a decent law, but then Mark Miller retired. So there is a start in the legislature. The legislature, if a legislator said to the Reference Bureau, pull out that election auditing law that you were working on for Mark Miller, let's keep going with that, we could probably have a good start on it. And the league would be, a perfect organization to start pushing that. So yeah, I'll put all this in an email.
Do you have Deb Cronmiller's contact information?
Yeah, I'm sure I do. Yeah.
Yeah, it's dcronmiller@lwvwi.org.
Okay.
Any
And
other questions?
you can use my name if you'd like to put it in as having referred you to her, because I'm on the State League board.
Oh, great. Okay.
We've had a question about, we are recording this, and we've had a question about where the recording will be available after, where is it uploaded? So maybe Petra, can you talk to that?
Yes, we're taking our record sessions and uploading them to our YouTube channel. So it'll be available to the public, assuming that's what you want to do with this. I think you should. This is an eye-opener.
And so does that mean that you go to YouTube and just put in lwvnor.org and see what comes up?
Or League of Women Voters of the Northwoods. I'm not sure. To be honest, I need to educate myself a little bit more about searching on YouTube, because unexpected things happen, and that's on my to-do list of things to be better versed on.
Sarah is raising her hand. Go
But
ahead,
I
Sarah.
would search for something in the title.
Okay, Sarah, go ahead.
Yes, I will upload it to the LWV NOW information YouTube channel.
Okay,
And so do a search for LWV NOW information and you will get the correct channel to.
okay. Yo? Unmute yourself, sweetie. We can't hear you.
Thank you.
Still can't hear you. Nope. I think
While we're waiting for Yo, all you have to do is to type in LWVNOW on YouTube, and you get our channel.
And you can type it into the chat, your question or comment.
And I was going to say, usually it goes up on our web page in latest news. Yeah, Yo puts it on our website.
Is that what you were trying to say, Yo?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know we'd be playing charades today, but there it is.
And then we can share it on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. And then I think if one subscribes to our YouTube channel, every time a new one comes up, it just pops up for you if you hit the subscribe button.
And do me a favor and share the YouTube video with your local election clerks. Every time I give a presentation like that, I always say, please, please, please invite all the local election officials, please, please, please. And once every 10 times, one of them will show up. And I don't know what it is. I don't know why they don't want to talk about this stuff in public. But maybe they'll watch a YouTube video in private.
We have made efforts over the course of years to provide resource materials for local clerks, and it gets tricky when we offer, they have trouble, trouble's not the right word. the resources, the time to do the training. And technically, the county clerk is supposed to facilitate the training. I think somebody else could chime in here on that. And sometimes they're not so interested in having an outside organization do that, but then the end result doesn't happen. So that was like 4 years ago. I don't know what the situation is now. So
Well, if I can dump another scary topic on you, right now, a lot of the jurisdictions in northern Wisconsin use something called the ABC Edge voting machine, and that the manufacturer isn't supporting that after, I think, the end of 2021. So you're all in the process of replacing a lot of voting machines in northern Wisconsin right now. And the big machine that's being considered is the Dominion ICE machine, Image Cast Evolution ICE machine. And if you get online and you research what people know about the security and the design of every voting machine, that is the worst voting machine on the market. The Dominion ICE machine has this feature built into it that it can make marks on the ballots after the voter casts them. I know, it's called a hybrid machine, and the only thing, I mean, given the benefit of the doubt, it's just carelessness that they didn't think about this when they designed the machine. But, you know, the ballot can both serve as a ballot marking device where you use a touch screen to mark a ballot and print it, or it can count ballots that voters just mark by hand and then insert into the machine. But in any way, so it has the capability of both printing a ballot and just counting ballots, but it uses the same paper slot to insert both of them in it. So it goes back under the printer head. And I mean, it has been demonstrated by, hackers like, academics and universities, saying, look, I can program this machine to make extra marks on the ballot after it's cast. And so it would have to be deliberate programming. But anyway, it's just a really, really bad feature. And it was Oneida County, there was a voter there, Catherine Parker, who knew this, and she went to the Lake Tomahawk and, tried to get them to reject these machines because all the municipalities in Oneida County had to agree. And she did convince them to reject it, but it was information they didn't have. There's nobody talking to the municipal clerks and the county clerks about the pros and cons of the voting machines that are on the market. And again, Catherine and I went to the Elections Commission because the Election Commission knows this. And we said, can't you get word out to all the counties that are replacing the ABC Edge now about the pros and cons of the voting systems that are available to them, and let them know that the Dominion ICE machine has this massive flaw that has national election security experts just going, oh my God. And Elections Commission, Richard Rydecki told me no, that the Elections Commission does not see it as their job to intervene in the purchasing decisions of the local municipalities and clerks. So there's nobody giving them, I mean, the only people they're talking to when they decide which voting machines to buy are the vendors. And the vendors aren't going to mention this. And so that's another thing. I'll put that on the list. Get Elections Commission to, provide a buyer's guide to the voting machines, pros and cons, and be honest. Make sure that the election, that's the other problem. The election officials in Oneida County, according to Catherine Parker, hadn't even talked to any vendor but Dominion. The Command Central, the company that serviced the ABC Edge, recommended Dominion as the replacement, and that was the only vendor they talked to. And the ICE machine was the only machine they recommended. And so they didn't even know about the, much more secure machines from Clear Ballot or the ES&S DS200, the one that's used in Lincoln County. That's much more acceptable. Anyway, sorry.
Okay, Karen Kitsey had a question about that. So you talked about the safest voting machine. She asked that question. And then who programs the machine?
Um, Programming is sort of complicated. I always like, when I'm doing this in person, I always wave my cell phone around and say, the programming inside this, a lot of it is installed there by the manufacturer and you never see it. But on the other hand, when you get a new cell phone, you have to set it up with your display and your phone book and stuff like that. So there's many levels of programming in the county elections management computer and the voting machines computer. Some of it is installed when it's manufactured by the manufacturer. Some of it is updated at various times by the manufacturer. But the programming is changed for every election. And in some places in Wisconsin, the county clerk gets an application from the vendor that they can, in their own office, use the county elections management computer to design a ballot and set it up and to create instructions for each voting machine. And most counties, the county clerk approves the final ballot and gets the information, okay, these are the races on the ballot, these are the candidates' names, this is what order I want the candidates' names in, and they just ship that off to the vendor. Again, who could be anywhere. And I mean, I asked one county clerk, who do you send this to? And she said, Becky. And I said, well, who's Becky? She didn't know Becky's last name. All she knew was that Becky did have an email address that had, Dominion.com after it, And and then Becky emails her back, this alert, like, okay, I've finished with the programming, you can download it now. And yeah, so it really varies. The programming comes from all over. Some of it's installed in the machine, some of it's updated when an update is necessary, some of it's changed before every election. Did that answer your question? Probably too much.
I saw that Petra had a question. She had her hand raised.
Yes, Karen, you mentioned early on about technicians servicing machines in the field and installing software. Do you know anything about that? Like what the reasons are that they would be doing that? I suppose it's updates, right? See, it doesn't make sense to me. The thing that really blows my mind about this whole thing is I worked in the pharmaceutical industry and I was involved with a lot of critical computer systems, including auditing them and making sure that they worked properly. FDA enforces regulations that ensure that these systems work properly, because it's really important that drugs, that the data that support the marketing of drugs is reliable, and also when they're manufactured that they're safe and effective. And it's amazing, what is done to make sure that systems work properly. You can never get it quite 100%.
Can I
but a lot of those systems is so much more complex than counting votes. I just don't understand the contrast between all of those requirements that are there, a federal agency imposing those requirements. And here we have voting machines where okay, we lost Cheryl.
No,
I don't understand
I'm
how
here.
we can, something so important as this, that there wouldn't be requirements to make sure those darn things work as they should. I mean, the idea that, like the switching where the yeses were no's and the no's were yeses, I mean, it's absolutely appalling, because like in the pharmaceutical industry, man, you gotta test that thing and you've got a challenge test.
We're having technical difficulties
And,
here.
you know, everything has to be done to make sure that that thing works as it's supposed to, and why there are not such requirements. And also the fact that any foreign vendors, that would even be permitted is absolutely appalling, I think. I wonder what's happened. I don't hear. Oh, okay.
I think, how's it going
What's
now?
going on?
Well, were people having trouble hearing Petra?
Yes, she was broken up.
Oh.
Are you
Karen,
having trouble hearing me?
Karen McKim was off for a while. She missed most of what Petra said.
Is that the case, Karen? Did you?
I accidentally put my speakers off while I was talking. And so, yeah, I didn't hear for about 2 minutes until I realized that I turned my speakers off and turned them back on. So,
Oh.
yeah, what was the main point?
Well, the main point was basically the lack of requirements for the things for what are normally done for critical computer systems to make sure that they're developed properly and that they function properly. The fact that those standards don't exist for voting machines is really, it's appalling.
Couple of things. The standards do exist, or they're starting to exist. Can you hear me now? Am I doing good? Yeah. Okay. The Federal Elections Assistance Commission does have something called voluntary voting, VBA. I don't know, voluntary voting standards that do have computer basic requirements in them. The first version was adopted in very speedy fashion right after the 2000 elections, when the nation just geared up and bought computers to count our votes. And they were very sloppy and they were very bad in security things. They were updated a little bit, but they just fell behind. I don't know if you guys are aware of it, but the Federal Elections Commission and the Elections Assistance Commission were just sort of left to rot for many years because of partisan considerations. And for a while, they didn't even have a quorum of members appointed. They couldn't update the standards because they just didn't have enough commissioners. And so there is a draft set of security standards for voting system that's in draft form right now, but in the Trump administration, it hasn't been adopted. And so, yeah, there are no federal standards. But even if there were federal standards for voting machines, they'd be voluntary, because in the United States, election administration is a state responsibility. And in fact, the federal guidelines got so far out of date. I mean, election security has come a long way since 2000, that the state legislature, just within the past year or two maybe, broke Wisconsin away from the federal standards. They said, no, we don't have to buy machines anymore that meet federal standards, because that's kind of pointless anyway. So yeah, that's an area that does need to be cleaned up, and it is being cleaned up, and it will be cleaned up if we get a better federal administration in there someday. But there was a problem with the machines and the manufacturers moving much faster than the government can. Like for example, those hybrid machines. Nobody thought to make them illegal, because nobody thought that would be a problem. Why would you invent a machine that could make marks on ballots after the vote is cast? They didn't think to forbid it.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Don't you think it's crazy that any foreign vendors would even be permitted to be involved in, in configuring these machines, programming them. It's crazy.
Yeah, well, in terms of the components being manufactured in China, the vendors testified to Congress that they had no choice, that certain components that have to go in computers are only manufactured in China. And
Okay, does anyone else have any questions or anything that, Catherine, it was, Parker, it was awesome to hear your name and as part of that, catching the,
is she, oh, Catherine, there you
The-
are. I realized you were on.
so that's really amazing, but we're coming down, I think, to the end here. Is there any, anything else, Karen McKim, that you would like to add, like one big takeaway for us?
Oh my gosh. I don't know. I'll just go back to what I've worked on since 2012. We need to get Wisconsin up to speed with outcome securing audits. That would help so much in terms of, just that one last thing at the end, check to make sure it's right. And it covers all sorts of security threats, deliberate, accidental, whatever. It can catch them all and fix them before they do any real harm. We've got to get outcome securing audits to Wisconsin routinely.
So this is just Deborah. What are the biggest just barriers when you've talked to people in Wisconsin to getting that? So, I mean, since if you've been working on this, will you share that in the list or report you sent to Dorothy?
Yes, I will. Catherine, now that I know you're on, I'm sorry I missed you. Do you want to speak to that a little bit? What were some of the barriers that you found when you realized that the Dominion Ice Machine was being considered for Lake Tomahawk? You're on mute right now. Okay, there.
Yeah, part of it is just that the county is going with Command Central, so it's like outsourced that part of it already, which, we're not prepared to do all that stuff here. But we didn't have any other vendors or any other machines considered. And I'm trying to say this in a nonpartisan way. County clerks sometimes have a little more power than their abilities justify. And the municipal clerks, it's a part-time job. It's above their pay grade in a certain way, although I think if the information were presented to them, that they'd be more open to it. But the other thing is, this was kind of a last minute thing that Command Central did. They said, we're not going to support this after 2021. That still gives us 2 years. But they said, we're going to give you a special deal. We'll give you this $1,500 discount if you buy the machines in August of 2020. And for a lot of clerks and a lot of town boards, that's all they heard, saving money. And the other part is that most towns have to have, the gold standard is an optical scanner separate from a ballot marking device. We have to have a ballot marking device for people with disabilities. And for many towns to buy 2 machines is cost prohibitive, but I still think there's workarounds to that. And apparently Lake Tomahawk will be the vanguard of this. And so, it is something to check with your own clerks about, and, your own town boards, sometime in 2021, not right now. They're all busy.
Right.
Thank you. And Karen McKim, thank you so much for joining us today. And thanks to everybody who showed up and all the good questions and all the good work. We're a team here, and this is really clear when we're working together. And I love the number of people that ask Karen what we can do to further these things, because that ultimately is the bottom line. How do we take this into action going forward? So all really good questions. Thank you very much, everybody. Karen, I have a suggestion for you that I wanted to add offline about your website and stuff like that.
Oh, yes.
So, but I think that's the end of the meeting. We can stop recording.
I have one more message here from Jackie Cody to everyone. She says the Oneida County Clerk is encouraging any money left from routes to recovery should be spent on the ice machine. This was announced at our last town meeting.
I think what happens is the town clerks and county clerks, and I've seen this in lots of places, not just here, they feel that one of their primary responsibilities to their constituency is to save money. And this is, I mean, they take this as like one of their biggest mandates. And we've had issues in Illinois where there was money there to spend, but they did not want to spend it, or they had their taxpayers saying, we want you to spend this on this. We are not concerned about not spending money. We're concerned about not spending money on this issue. But it's very drilled into their head that they can go back later and say, look, I saved you taxpayer money, and they get focused on that. And I don't think it's a partisan thing. I think it's really just a, that's how they see a big piece of their job. So
I thought we just said that ice machines weren't going to be used in Wisconsin.
no.
Did I misunderstand that?
Yes.
The use of ice machines is growing in Wisconsin.
So even though they make marks on ballots,
They can be programmed to make extra marks on ballots. Yeah.
so Catherine, are they still, your Tomahawk isn't going to buy those, Lake Tomahawk, but others might. Okay.
Town of Newbold will not be using its routes to recovery money for the machines because voting machine money is set aside in the town budget.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Oh, Catherine?
Just to Deborah, I think every other town in Oneida County has already purchased the Dominion machines. They won't be using them in this election, to the best of my understanding. But this is something to deal with after November.
Wow. So
20 out of 21 in Oneida County will be have committed to buying the ice machines. And whatever websites they were pointed to, the clerk's first defense is there's no such website showing any of this information. And I have said yes. And further, I think, Catherine, there is concern on the federal level of ice machines being used. And just think of this, should the federal government ever have enough courage to say ice machines will not be used in any elections, 20 of the 21 municipalities are out all their money in Oneida County and have to start over again. And it is poo-pooed that anybody's looking at possibly saying these shouldn't be used because the WEC doesn't tell them they have this issue with the machines. So it's all a matter of blind leading the blind and vendors who are making out like bandits.
Yep.
And they will continue to do that until some legitimate body says, look, we've got a guide, just like I get a Medicare guide in the mail every year telling me all my options for insurance. I should be receiving a guide every year with all the voting machine options, just like I get for Medicare. And these people should be held accountable. You cannot hold 1,850 clerks accountable as long as there's no system. Wisconsin has no system. So you have 1,850 people going 1,850 ways. And you have county clerks who will serve as a gatekeeper because why not? It's no skin off their teeth to say, oh, I'm the one that arranged for this sale. Oh, nice. Did you know what you were selling when you came to the circus, or did you just sell? So it's no, it's an issue fraught with stepping on toes. It's an issue of saying we need huge legislative change. But in order for any of that to happen, we have to make legislative change this November. That's my last words on it. I'll get going and I'll never stop.
thanks for all the work that you do, Jackie. Okay, thank you so much. I think the meeting is over for today. And just really appreciate everybody's, and yeah, big hand for Karen.
Yes, thank you, Karen.
Big hand for you too. Thanks so much.